Welcome back to Proxy, everybody, and today we are going to discuss perhaps what is my favorite unit in the new codex, and that is the Guardian Deathstar. So there's been a little bit of talk about this unit. There's not a lot of players who seriously consider this unit to be effective, but I have to say I'm one of those people who thinks this unit is absolutely bonkers, and I've actually tried it in a game, and I can tell you for a fact that in certain detachments, it's not only good, but probably a staple of the list. This unit is going to surprise people. And I have to say, it's extremely effective in multiple different ways, which we will go into later in this video. Now, as of now, the Guardian Deathstar is one of those units that is probably kind of getting overshadowed, as well as the detachments that it's good in, because so many people are focused on the aspect host and the war host, right? Because those are just very powerful, obviously powerful, and there's a lot of very strong synergies with them. So not a lot of people are thinking about guardians right now, but I can assure you that having used this unit in the Seer Council detachment, it's not only good, but it competes for damage with certain units in Aspect Host and War Host. Not quite with the Zerman's unit, don't get me wrong, but it competes with other Aspect Warriors that are on the shooty side. It's very good. So without further ado, let us go ahead and dive right in and talk about why this unit is so effective. So in this video, we're going to be talking first about what the Guardian Deathstar is and how to build it in your lists, what detachment it works best in, the pros and cons of the unit, and an example of how to impact the board and use the unit in Tabletop Simulator. I'll kind of show you guys how to position it and how to take advantage of your opponent. So what is the Guardian Deathstar and how do you build it? So there's actually two different ways to build up the Guardian Deathstar. There is the Storm Star, which involves Storm Guardians, and there's the Defender Star, which involves Guardian Defenders. Now the Storm Star is interesting. The Storm Star includes 10 Storm Guardians, Eldrad, a Warlock Conclave, and a Warlock. So essentially what you do here is in your declare reserves and, basically attach leaders step in your deployment before you deploy any units. You attach Eldrad to the Warlock Conclave. The Warlock Conclave then attaches itself to the Storm Guardians. And because you have a single Warlock that has the special rule that says it can attach to a unit even if there is already a Farseer attached to it, you attach the Warlock to it as well. Now, unless that gets errated, that's pretty much rules as written that you can have both of them in the unit. Warlocks, single Warlocks, at least one of them. You can't have two single Warlocks in a unit, I don't think. But you can definitely have one of them with the Conclave and Eldrad. So, this unit is pretty insane. Now, it's a little expensive, but it provides really good Overwatch. You're getting 7 Flamers with the unit, and it gives you sticky objectives on a fairly durable unit. So remember, you are getting with Storm Guardians a 5+ invulnerable save. You are getting -1 to wound because the Warlock Conclave gives you -1 to wound, and your opponent is going to be at -2 to their charge rolls against this unit. That's on top of the fact that you can also fade back or fade away, right? So that you can, once you're shot at, fade back behind a wall and basically become, a little more durable because you're going to be out of line of sight. Now, this combo for the max unit without the single Warlock will cost you around 400 points. But this can be tweaked to be a bit cheaper if you don't want as many Warlocks. And of course, this particular unit cannot take a support weapon. Only the Guardian Defenders can. So that is going to make the unit cheaper as well. So this unit actually comes to a reasonable cost. It's a little bit pricey, right? You're paying essentially 110 points for the Conclave. You're paying 100 points for Storm Guardians. You're already up to 210. Eldrad is 120, that's 330, and you're going to be paying 45 points for the single Warlock, so that is going to be about 380 points, which is fairly expensive. And if you consider taking a enhancement on the unit, you're easily going to get up to 400 points. But this is a unit, again, that provides great battlefield control, sticky objectives, so your opponent can't just ignore it, right? Because your objective is going to become sticky, has to interact with this unit in some way. And it provides a lot of damage. Eldrad has Doom and Mind War, of course, which are very powerful. The Warlocks are providing 5, Strength 7, AP -1, D6 +2 attack flamers. And in certain detachments, you can get, and actually in the Seer Council detachment, which I believe this is best in, you're going to be able to also give it the stratagem, which ignores cover. I think it's called Ish's Fury, but I could be wrong on that. It's either Ish's Fury or it's... I'm going to look that up in a second. But basically, and, it gives you ignores cover, and it gives you critical wounds have AP -1. So an additional AP, which is really strong with something that auto hits. So you're getting a ton of attacks with this unit, right? And, again, it's reasonably tough. So I have tried this unit as well, and it did do fairly well in another game that I played at 1,000 points. I played 2 games total so far. They've both been with Seer Council just because I really wanted to try these units out. And one of them was with the Guardian Star, which was very effective, and one of them was with the Storm Guardian Star, which was also pretty good. All right, let's talk about the Defender Star. So the Defender Star is 10 Guardian Defenders. You could have Eldrad or a Farseer in there. You can also have, of course, a Warlock Conclave and a support weapon. Now, you could also attach a just regular old Warlock into this unit. I don't think it's quite as necessary, to be honest. I think you probably just want the Conclave in this unit because this unit is more of a, this is going to be at a farther back, at more of a distance from your opponent. You're not going to be so close to your opponent with this unit at all times. But, -2 to charge isn't bad. And also you're getting a pretty powerful flamer with that Warlock as well. Now, this unit provides really good Overwatch and is able to get a reactive move to allow it to become much harder to target or gain a positional advantage. So, Guardian Defenders get free fade back, which makes this unit extremely strong, extremely durable against shooting, and very hard to deal with. It does cost around 405 points for the max unit, but again, just like the Storm Star, it can be tweaked to be cheaper with less Warlocks and no support weapon. Personally, though, I think the best way to run this unit is with the support weapon, because this will make it, believe it or not, a horde unit, which means your opponent can't discard Call the Horde against you when they draw their secondary. So a lot of times what's going to happen is your opponent's going to try to kill this unit, they're going to fail because of your stratagem support and your durability, and they're going to not be able to score on that objective. So either they're going to have to discard the objective for a CP, or they're going to have to try to recycle it right away to get a new objective. And that's going to cost your opponent a little bit of a CP tax. So either way, this unit is dictating a lot of what your opponent is going to be doing with their secondary objective game. And of course, with the primary objective game, this unit is not bad at scoring primary. Okay, so let's talk about what detachments this unit is best in. Now, there's 2 detachments that have really good synergy with it. It's decent in most detachments, right? Both of these units can work in pretty much every detachment that there is. However, there's 2 that stand out and make it incredibly powerful and probably more worth it than the other detachments. And those are, number 1, the Seer Council, which I believe is the best detachment probably in the entire lineup. And I don't say that lightly. I've done a lot of looking at, the codex. I've done a lot of looking at the points. I've played a couple games with the Seer Council now at smaller point levels. And the Seer Council, guys, is absolutely insane. And then we have the Guardian Battle Host. Now, the Guardian Battle Host A lot of people kind of think of it as a meme. Lots of Guardians on the battlefield. I think the Guardian Battle Host is still good with this type of unit, but there are some weaknesses that this unit has that the Guardian Battle Host unfortunately does not address. So we do need to talk about those when we talk about the specific detachments. So let's talk about the Seer Council first. This is personally my favorite detachment. It's beautiful. It's a masterpiece. I didn't give it enough credit when I first kind of reviewed it, but after playing it, it's extremely good. Being able to just pick up a unit, put it wherever you want on the battlefield, especially if it's a high potency unit, is really strong. This is my personal favorite detachment for the massive amount of utility it provides. And of course, we are a utility based army and we need to be very mobile. That's kind of how the Eldar work in general. So basically, there's a couple things that you'll want to consider when taking the Guardian Deathstar in this list. You're going to want to consider taking the Runes of Warding enhancement, which gives the unit a 4+ feel no pain against mortals, psychic attacks, and devastating wounds. This is extremely strong. Now, what I will also say is that it is slightly expensive, right? I believe it is 25 points after the points update. And that seems really insane, right? Runes of Warding seems kind of too expensive. But hear me out. A good opponent will look at a unit like this and see all of its durability buffs and be like, I'm just going to shoot it with grenades, or I'm just going to mortal wound this thing to death. There's a lot of things in the game right now that can deal a ton of mortal wounds, and that will just kill your unit. If your opponent is able to get through all of your Guardians and get to the Warlocks and get through all of their invulnerable saves with dev wounds, with an extreme volume of attacks, unfortunately, it's just not going to be that good, right? So you definitely want something to protect them. Runes of Warding can do this. You can put it on a single Warlock, a solo Warlock, or you could put it on a Farseer. That is pretty good. Now, the Forewarned stratagem, in case they do get into combat, gives them -1 to hit and -1 to wound in the fight phase. This is really good if you manage to get engaged. It is hard to engage an Eldar army, but there are other armies out there that can do it. Very fast armies that you have to deal with, and having a -1 to hit, -1 to wound in the first round of combat, you use your Guardians as kind of a meat shield, and then you strike back with the Warlocks, the Farseer, and all that stuff, and that can be pretty good, right? Forewarned is a good situational stratagem. Unshrouded Truth is the best stratagem with this unit, probably, because it gives them a free redeploy in their movement phase anywhere on the battlefield outside of 9 inches of enemy units. And this is a massive boost in their mobility, and it gives you a lot of options. Your opponent is not always going to be able to screen this out. In the first couple of turns, yeah, your opponent might be able to screen it very effectively. But you can use the squad as kind of hang them back, pop the Bright Lance out of a ruin, use your Bright Lance with the Farseer to get an automatic Overwatch, which you can do because you can change a hit roll to a 6, and kind of just annoy your opponent with a Shadow Weaver. And then when the opportunity arises, you can use the stratagem on them, pop them behind something expensive, and absolutely obliterate it with the combination of stratagems and unit synergies. It's a really good stratagem, and it's honestly one of the best in the detachment. Ish's Fury can deal mortal wounds to enemy units that end their move within 9 inches, which is really good against charging units. It's basically going to kill 2 Marines, which will blunt the charge of any unit coming in. It's also going to automatically kill characters, things like the Solitaire. This is actually the perfect stratagem to deal with the Solitaire because the Solitaire has 4 wounds, and you are dealing, basically, 4 mortal wounds and damage on average. So that will just kill the Solitaire pretty much outright. You could also Overwatch the Solitaire, but the nice thing about Ish's Fury is you can do both Ish's Fury and Overwatch. This unit, especially in the Seer Council, is a really good stratagem sponge, and you could just chain stratagems on this unit all game long and keep it very effective throughout the game. Psychic Shield gives them an 18-inch lone op ability, which is extremely good if you think about the range of the Guardians. So the range of the Guardians is, of course, 18 inches. You will probably want to get into 12 a lot of the times, but you don't always have to. It's not always necessary to get that close to the enemy with this particular unit. And if you're at 18 inches, your opponent moves within their range. within 18, shoots them once, you can use Fade Back for free because of the Guardian Defenders, and you will be outside of 18. If they try to shoot other things at you, you can say, oh, I'm alone up now. You can't shoot me anymore. And that can really mess up your opponent's plans as well. This unit can also be given Ignores Cover and an additional AP -1 on critical wounds with Fate Inescapable. That was the stratagem I was thinking about earlier. But anyway, that's really good as well, especially on all of your auto-hitting torrent weapons. So essentially what you do, you throw 5 auto-hitting flamers, you're doing, 5d6 plus 10 attacks, you're getting a ton of attacks, and you're getting AP -2 on those to boot, which is really strong. It's incredible Overwatch, and it's really good. Of course, you don't always need to use that, but when you're coming down within, 9 or just outside of 9 inches of an enemy unit that's on a back objective, you can easily just destroy them with this stratagem. The detachment also gives them, like I said, a ton of free strats, which allows them to chain stratagems, and it basically makes the unit extremely strong in almost any situation that they will find themselves in. And I really do think maybe the only weakness of this unit is the very expensive cost of Warlocks. Okay, let's talk about this unit in a Guardian Battle Host. So this detachment increases the damage and durability of your Guardian Deathstar. So either the Defender Star or the Storm Star, it's going to increase your damage. It's going to give you +1 to hit against enemies on objectives. It's also going to give you the ability to take the Ethereal Pathway Enhancement to give the unit Infiltrate. You're typically going to want to do this on a Storm Star, but you could do it on a Defender Star if you want to. Protector of the Paths enhancement gives them a once per game free Overwatch that hits on a 4+ when in control of an objective, or just a 5+ normally, which is decent, but they're mostly auto hitting anyway because of flamers, but it is a free Overwatch. The Breath of Vol enhancement gives a Storm Star rerolls on flamer attacks and fusion gun damage rolls, which again, it's decent. I don't know if it's an auto include, but it does improve their damage. Warding Salvos, the stratagem, gives them rerolls wounds against units on objectives, which is nice. Shield Nodes gives them -1 to wound when on an objective. And Time to Strike gives a Storm Star advance shoot and charge with a 6-inch advance, which is very good. Blades of Azurian gives their weapons a pistol keyword to shoot while engaged, which is interesting, and it might come up at some points in the game, but remember this unit is really not that good at taking a charge. And the cost of victory allows the unit to go back into reserve while resurrecting all destroyed Guardian models in the unit, which is absolutely insane. So, what do I think of the Guardian Battle Host? Well, it's very powerful on paper, but I think in practice, when you're actually playing a game with this unit, a good opponent is not going to let you just shoot their most valuable units on objectives, right? A lot of the stratagems require your opponent to be on objectives, right? The rerolls wounds, your opponent has to be on an objective. +1 to hit, your opponent has to be on an objective. You don't have any super mobility aside from the Time to Strike on Storm Guardians, so you can't just redeploy your units anywhere you want. The cost of victory is very good, don't get me wrong, but you're still in just normal reserves, so you might not actually be able to get to where you want to go on the battlefield. Although it is an amazing stratagem, and I think it's obviously the best in this detachment because you just get to revive Guardians for free, which is good. But the kind of trade for that is that you don't get something like 18-inch Lone Op, and you don't get an ability that just allows you to redeploy anywhere on the battlefield, right? So that can be a little bit tough. Now, I think the Guardian Battle Host is really good with just tons of Guardians. You don't want just the Death Star. You also want a ton of just 10-man units of Guardians. So you probably want about 2 units of Storm Guardians in this type of list, and you probably want about 3 Defender units, one of them being the Defender Star, and the others probably just carrying a support weapon. That's probably what you want to do. There's a couple of kind of cool different ways that you can build the Guardian Battle Host up with different Guardian units, support weapons, War Walkers, and stuff like that, which is really good. War Walkers tend to be really good with this detachment because they give everything extra damage, but it is a slower detachment, so you do have to keep that in mind. So what are the pros and the cons of the unit? Because obviously this unit does look strong, and it is strong. I've played it, so I'm well aware of its power. However, it does have some weaknesses that you need to be aware of. So obviously the pros of this unit are that it has great objective and board control. Great objective control, meaning that units that move within range of objectives, if this unit's nearby, they're not going to be safe. They're going to be able to just basically control objectives from your opponent. It's not easy to kill either because it's going to have that permanent -1 to wound because of Protect, which the Warlock Conclave has. So opponents aren't going to be able to easily indirect fire this unit to death, right? Your opponent's not going to be able to just fire a bunch of indirect fire at the unit and kill it. As for its board control, because it has such good Overwatch capabilities, your opponent's not going to be able to get around it easily with a lot of units. If your opponent wants to do a 6-inch deep strike with Scions, good luck, because they are going to die a horrible, horrible death. In both detachments, by the way, doesn't matter which one it is, the Flamers being able to just auto hit are going to absolutely destroy things like Scions. They have a very reasonable damage output as well with strat and unit synergies. You have things like Shroud Runners, which can take away cover. You have the Seer Council Detachment stratagem, which allows you to take away cover and get critical AP -1 damage, right? You have the ability to, in the Guardian Battle Host, get rerolls wounds, +1 to hit on units with objectives. You have Warwalkers that can give you -1 AP. You just have a lot of synergies available that boost this unit's damage output considerably. I think one of the weaknesses of this unit is that it's AP -1 base, but there's a lot of ways to increase that now. Also, which is different in this type of codex, because we don't have a lot of durability anymore, right? Wraithguard, Wraith Lords, basically all the durability of most of our Wraith units went down a little bit. Not by an incredible amount, but we don't have Fortune anymore, so that is a big deal, right? The Avatar of Cain nerf, as far as its durability, went down by a lot. Wraith Lords are kind of the same durability, honestly. They did lose a toughness, but it doesn't really matter against a lot of weapons. Toughness 10 and toughness 11 are very close in, what they can perform for you. There's not a lot of strength 10 weapons out there, really, except missile launchers. And even then, missile launchers typically don't have the AP to really get through the heavy save of a Wraith Lord and cover. But, you are looking at something that has good durability for Aeldari, right? This unit is durable compared to Aspect Warriors, compared to a lot of the units in your list, especially in a vehicle and monster meta, right? We are in a meta that is based on vehicles and monsters. There's going to be a lot of weapons that are tailored to kill those models. So if you have a unit that is a light infantry unit like Guardians, but they're buffed up by a bunch of durability buffs, then that unit is going to be much harder to kill, right? It's just a fact. Your opponent's going to load up their weapons, their units, weapons and stuff with las cannons, with plasma guns, with, melt-a-guns. Those single shot weapons are not going to be as effective into this unit. Now, let's talk about the cons. The cons are, this is an expensive unit. It is around 400 points, and that can get you a lot of Aspect Warriors. So if you want to run an MSU style list, I would suggest not taking this unit. I would obviously say that you probably should think about taking a Guardian Defender unit or a Storm Guardian unit in an Aspect Host, because they offer some, pretty good utility for objectives and stuff like that. But do you take the Guardian Deathstar in an Aspect Host? Probably not. You probably want those points for more Aspect Warriors. They are also very hard to use, and if you misplay or misposition them, they will not make much of an impact. If you throw them out into the middle of the board thinking they're going to soak up a bunch of firepower, and they don't have the movement, or you don't place them correctly so that they can, fade away, so you can use either the Lone Op stratagem in the Seer Council, or you can use, any kind of durability buffs that you have in Guardian War Host or Battle Host, so that you can go back in reserve and still have your Guardians alive. It's just not going to be a good ending for this unit, right? Bolters do kill this unit rather effectively with Oath of Moment, so that is something to consider as well, right? If you are facing the most basic Space Marine player, if you don't position your models correctly, Bolt rifles can take out all of the guardians in this unit in one blast. So if your opponent has 2 units of 5 regular intercessors, they can actually, with Oath of Moment, kill off 10 guardians on average, right? So that's only going to leave your warlocks, and if your warlocks fall back with fadeaway, your opponent might have something to pick them up anyway. So it's not really a great thing to just leave them out in the open, right? This is not one of those units. You do have to place them carefully. So placing them carefully means placing them near ruins so that they can just fade back right away, or placing them strictly far enough away in a Seer Council so that they can make use of the lone op stratagem. They are also, like I said, extremely vulnerable to volume shooting and combat. Lots of attacks will bring this unit down. And if you don't have the runes of warding, lots of attacks with dev wounds will very much bring this unit down quickly. Because the warlocks, they don't have a save, they only have an invul, and, you know, unless you take runes of warding, they have no feel, no pain, and they only have two wounds apiece. So they are fairly squishy. You do have to watch out for that. This is, after all, even with -1 to wound, a toughness 3 unit. So you got to be careful with it. Alrighty, so welcome to the tabletop simulator example for our video on the Guardian Deathstar. Now, there's 2 types of Death Stars that you can realistically go with, of course. There's the Storm Star and Defender Star, and they both look slightly different, but they're essentially the same idea, right? We're going to take a unit of Guardians, we're going to max it out with as much as they can take. So we're either going to take Eldrad or a Farseer. Currently, I think rules is written, you can take both, but that seems like something that's going to be FAQ'd very quickly, that you can only take one or the other in the unit. Just seems a little too powerful. I don't think GW would allow for that, so we're probably not going to see that. But you can definitely take a Warlock Conclave and either Eldrad or a Farseer in there, as well as an additional Warlock, right? So it's either going to look something like this. You're going to have a unit of 4 or a unit of 5 Warlocks. The 10 Guardians, you're going to have either Eldrad or a Farseer, and in the Guardian Defender unit, you're going to have a support weapon. And that's basically what it's going to look like. So this is what the unit looks like on the battlefield. Each of these units is well over 20 wounds, which again, if your opponent draws Cull the Horde, they have to keep it. They can't discard it. They have to either pay the CP or they have to, you know, discard it at the end of their turn for an additional command point at the end. They have to make that choice. Now, as for how to deploy this unit, we are actually looking at this mission, right? This is actually one of the Pry Nexus missions. We're looking at Crucible of Battle, Swift Action, which actually allows our battle line units to advance and fall back and still perform an action. That's pretty good with, you know, Guardians. So that's another thing, right? Some of the mission rules do quite handily benefit this unit. And we have the Ritual, which means you can deploy an objective in your army. And, you know, this is good with things like Rangers or Striking Scorpions. They can deploy an extra objective for you, and you can actually control an extra objective in the middle. And this is one of those missions that normally Eldar aren't that good at, but with this unit, it actually is kind of brilliant, right? Because we can actually put, believe it or not, an objective right around this area, right? And we can actually score on that objective. We just have to be 6 inches away from another objective. So we can actually just auto score this. Now your opponent can do the same thing, obviously, but it allows us to score primary points more efficiently, especially with a unit that's more durable. So we're going to go into how to use each one of these units separately, and then we're going to go ahead and talk about how to engage with them. Okay, so let's go ahead and start out by taking a look at the Guardian Defender Squad, the Defender Star. So when looking at this unit, the best place to put it turn 1 when you're deploying is obviously somewhere safe where your opponent can't hit it, preferably on an objective, just so that, you know, you kind of have control over the objective. There's really no other reason. Now, if your opponent has things that can reach this area turn 1 where you're at, you probably just want to deploy a little farther back. Just make sure they're safe. That's the key. Especially in Seer Council. I think in Guardian Battle Host, you want them a little bit farther forward so that they can move up here and threaten this objective and shoot things and stuff on turn 1 and 2. And you definitely probably want to move them at some point up to here so they can contest these objectives with a lot of other support units and things like that in Guardian Battle Host. But in Seer Council, you want to keep them back here safe because remember, you can always just teleport them wherever you want to go. Now, there's a couple of things that your Guardian Defenders can do. So first of all, you'll notice I have a Shadow Weaver right here. I am not a proponent of the D-Cannon, and the reason why is because the D-Cannon doesn't do anything for you during the first couple turns of the game. It does absolutely nothing. The only time the D-Cannon can really do anything and make an impact is when you teleport the unit and you have direct line of sight on your opponents. And honestly, that may not always be the case. A lot of opponents are not going to just put a valuable vehicle in the middle of the field and say, hey, come shoot me with the D-Cannon, right? This is not something that's going to happen. However, what will happen is your opponent is often going to put a fragile-ish unit back here on their home objective to guard it. Something like cultists or a 10-man unit of Imperial Guard, right? Maybe with, 10 Catachans with Lord Solar. Something like that, right? It's going to be some squishy bodies back there. Maybe a squad of 5 Space Marines, something, right? You can use this Shadow Weaver to pepper that unit down so that it can't screen you as easily. So notice here how if we look at this unit back here, it's actually in a perfect position to just kind of screen out everything in the backfield, right? They don't have to worry about you coming in and blasting them because they have you screened. Right? And a smart player wouldn't even deploy like this. This was just me being lazy. They would make sure they're fully behind the wall with the first line of guys and make sure you just couldn't see them at all. So you can't get back here. However, after a couple turns of shooting this unit with a Shadow Weaver, they're going to be much harder pressed to actually screen you out. So, and just to give you an example of this, if we roll some dice here, right, you're getting D6 plus 4 attacks. It's usually D6 plus 2, but the weapon has blast. So, we're rolling D6 plus. I mean, I know that's terrible. Now, you could always use a command reroll if you really want to get some extra attacks. Honestly, it's probably not really worth it to do that. But, that's a really... Of course, when I'm recording, guys, it's always going to roll bad. But, let's just say we go with the 2. Let's just say we get 2 plus 4, right? It's going to be 6 attacks, hitting on 4s. We actually get a good number of hits there. So we're wounding on 2s now against cultists. Everything wounds. We're at AP -1, and I guess if you want to, you could do the ignores cover strat, but I wouldn't. So they're going to be taking 5+ saves, and they don't make any. They'll probably make 1. They lose 4 guys. Now, the important part about this is now if the unit wants to move to readjust themselves to be able to screen you still, they have to roll 6 more dice, and one of them is going to probably bite the dust. So over the course of 2 turns, you're going to kill enough of these guys here to be able to fully get into the opponent's backfield, and now they have to send something back here. So you're already controlling the pace of the battle with a 75-point unit. It's actually, guys, it's really good. I think it's better than a D-Cannon in a lot of ways. And if your opponent has a unit that is going to want to be moving around the battlefield, screening and stuff like that, you could just hit that unit. And now every time they move in their movement phase, they have to take essentially dangerous terrain checks. On the roll of a 1, they suffer a mortal wound. This is really powerful. Now, later on in the game, you're going to have units that are going to want to take this thing out. They're going to want to secure your home objective. They're going to want to take it out, or they're going to want to just kind of stage on you kind of like this. Maybe a Chaos Space Marine squad's right here. Maybe a Chaos Space Marine squad's right here on the tip, right here on this side of the ruin, right behind this wall right here, as you can see, in the middle of the battlefield, so that they can stage on you and assault your home objective with your ruin right here. Now, what you can do in this case is you can move your Guardians with the old teleport ability, right? And you can get right behind your opponent, or sometimes you don't even have to get right behind them. You could just get into a position where you could just shoot them to death. So if we notice here, We can't be anywhere outside of 9 inches. So we can either teleport behind them. You look here, we can teleport right behind them on this objective and just shoot them to death here, right? Now, that's one option. Now, however, if they have a lot of stuff right here to shoot you back, you probably don't want to do that. And this is where it gets kind of tricky with this Guardian squad. Now, your other option, right, is to simply move into this terrain piece, right? We can use a battle focus token to move 9 inches forward with an advance roll. So remember, you're also, adding your advance roll to it. And we can probably get most of these Guardians up here. So let's see. We have, that's not right. Where is it? Yeah, right here. This is the wall. So we get up 9 inches. Perfect. Then maybe we get a 3 on our battle focus, right? So maybe we get up to 12. So we can fit a good number of models in there. And all we really need, guys, is the Warlocks. If we fit the Warlocks in there and we have a couple Guardians that can also shoot, these guys are dead. Just, these guys are going to die, right? Toughness 4, 3-up save. When you're going up against, critical wounds on 1 with a stratagem, a Bright Lance, a Seer who's, casting Eldritch Storm with additional AP possibly, this unit's going to die, right? They're not going to have a good time. Now, that is also an option. The other thing is, you could just kind of move them up this way, right? You can teleport them right here. And this is actually the play I would probably go for. I would measure my distance here and just teleport them right here behind this. Your opponent can't really see them, and they're not going to have anything close enough to really threaten them. But if your Warp Talons move closer to you, you can use Ish's Fury, deal a lot of mortal wounds to them. You can overwatch them, and then they are going to die, right? So there's a couple of options that you can do to make sure that this unit actually gets this unit in a position where it can't do anything against you. So that's one thing you can do. Now, I mentioned earlier that these guys right here are going to be, kind of shot down. Later on in the game, turns 3, 4, or 5, probably more turns 4 or 5, your opponent's going to be thinly stretched. They're going to be trying to get all the points they can, and they're probably going to, at some point, leave their backfield open. And this is the time for your Guardians. So what you could easily do here is, let's say we kill all but we'll give them 2 models. We'll say we kill all but 2 models here, right? So they're barely holding on to this objective. They're just holding on for dear life, and they're right there, and they've kind of forgotten about screening. Maybe they're just kind of there for, some sort of secondary objective or something like that. Maybe your opponent, I think it's, has them for engage or something, right? And we're just going to take this unit wherever it is on the battlefield, and we're just going to plop it down right back here for your opponent, right? We're just going to have it right here in the backfield, and we're going to make sure all of our models are outside, of course, of 9 inches. But we can very well do this. This is a legal move because we don't care about their deployment zone. Right? So we can put that right there. As you can see, if there's only 2 models back here, we're well outside of 9 inches. And we can definitely go there. And then guess what? This squad is now dead. The other cool thing is, if there's no other models, we're actually protected from a lot of the other shooting, right? If they have a unit back here, or behind this ruin, or over here, we're actually fairly protected from enemy fire, right? Because we can always pop that Psychic Shield stratagem, and anything outside of this range right here, anything outside of there, anything over here, anything way over here is not going to be able to shoot you easily. It's not going to be able to shoot you easily. We could always move D6 plus 1. Maybe we get a 3, right? We can move 4 inches over here, make it even harder for our opponent to shoot us. And then, next turn, we can just walk on the objective like nothing happened. Ironically, if we don't want to shoot this unit, we could just leave them alive. I don't recommend this to anybody but the absolute, most risky plays. Like, if you really need to get this objective to hold it, to win the game, go for that 9-inch charge, right? That's a little too far, but we'd move our Warlock a little bit up so that it's a 9-inch charge. We get our 9-inch charge with a command reroll, perhaps. We kill that unit, we get the objective, we win the game. That is a big play that you can do. Now, obviously, you can do that with any unit, right? But I think it's especially good with this unit because it's not going to immediately die. If you go first, right? If you get the first turn and your opponent has the chance to kill whatever's on their home objective to reassert control so you can't score any VP, then having a more durable unit is going to be really important. Having something like 5 swooping hops or, a single warlock, it might do the job, but it's not going to survive the clapback, right? So that's something you have to think about as well. So there's a lot of cool things that this Guardian unit can do, and that's just one of them. Against my opponent, I was actually going up against Ultramarines. I had this unit in a position right here. Let me just show you real quick. I had him right about here. Approximately this area. He didn't have anything here at the time. I took it out with Striking Scorpions. He had a squad of Reavers right there. But he moved up a couple units of Intercessors onto this objective, right? So he had a couple of units of Intercessors on that objective. Let's go ahead and do this. Let's just say these are Intercessors, right? He was able to get these guys up here, and he was able to draw line of sight to my unit. And that was a big deal, right? Because basically, these guys are pretty easy to shoot at. Now, he was able to get within 18 inches. He was about 15 inches in, so I was like right there. And when he was shooting at me, yeah, he had range on me, right? He had 18 inches, so I couldn't use my Psychic Shield right away. So he fired his first unit, and luckily, I believe I had a model on the objective here, but it didn't really matter anyway because these guys don't get any kind of bonuses or anything like that on objectives, right? It's not Guardian War Host or Guardian Battle Host, for example. So what I had to do is I had to weather the storm of the first unit. They're throwing out 20 shots. He did Oath of Moment these guys, but luckily, most of them survived. I had cover, so I was saving on a 4+, and I think he ended up killing about 4 Guardians. 4 or 5. It was one of the two, but he did kill a good number of them. And then when he was going to shoot the second squad and basically eliminate this as being a potent threat, I used Fade Back, moved back even farther, right? When his first unit shot, and then when he went to shoot his second unit, all of a sudden, he's outside of 18 inches. You know what that means, guys. Psychic Shield time. Throw down the Psychic Shield, and now he can't shoot me anymore. And he also had a unit back here. I think it was a battle tank of some kind. It was one of those, I want to say Gladiator Lancer or something like that, but it was the infantry version. It was like an exterminator or something. I don't know what it's called, but it had auto cannons and it had a bunch of anti-infantry stuff. So that was going to hurt, right? So I was able to get out of dodge right there, Psychic Shield up, and I only lost 5 Guardians. Meanwhile, guess what he has out in the open now, right? He has 2 units of Intercessors. That's approximately 160 points, and also this, Gladiator that's just back here sitting here in the open, right? So on the other side of the battlefield, I had my Wraith Lords kind of like around this corner right here, and my Wraith Lords just moved up and blasted it and absolutely wrecked it, right? Just absolutely destroyed it. And the Flamers were able to take out a couple of these guys. I was able to actually use, another unit of infantry, Howling Banshees, to clean up one of these Marine squads. Actually, by the way, guys, Banshees, they do just about on average kill 5 Marines. So that's good. But you could also use a unit like a Zerman and 10 Dire Avengers to just come up here with the Wave Serpent, shoot them, right? You have the Wave Serpent positioned right about here. You pop them out. They shoot. They eliminate these 2 units really easily, and then they just come back in the Wave Serpent, and they're hidden, right? So they don't care. Okay, so that's some of the ways you can use the Guardian Defender squad. Again, it's a very hard unit to use, but you have to make sure your distances are correct. You have to make sure you're using it correctly. You can very easily use this unit to bait out opponents. And the cool thing is obviously because of the Farseer, the regular Farseer here, this Bright Lance can auto hit an Overwatch, and it can also get an automatic 8 damage on its damage rolls during its own turn. Okay, let's take a look at the Storm Star. Now, the Storm Star is a little bit different, but the Storm Star functions very similarly, but it wants to be more aggressive early. So what you could do with the Storm Star, instead of kind of hanging back and kind of baiting units out and waiting for a good chance to come into the backfield, you can actually use this unit to just aggressively push. So let's say that your opponent deploys right here, and it's your first turn. I think this unit is really good on the first turn. I think if it goes second, it may or may not be good. It just depends on what your opponent brings out and what army they're playing. But on the first turn, it's really good because it can sticky something right away. So let's say we have a Chaos Space Marine unit right here, and they're kind of ready to get onto this objective, or at least try to stage right here in this pocket. You don't want to allow them to get here, because then they're kind of immune to your shooting, and if you don't have a combat tool to deal with them, they're going to be tough. Also, Chaos Space Marines are, pretty good in combat. So what you can do here is simply pick this unit up, deep strike it outside of 9 inches. So you measure this, not deep strike, sorry, redeploy. Right, you measure this, and it's like, oh, okay, 9 inches is, I hate how it's doing that. 9 inches is right about here. So that means that you can actually fit. See how you can fit all your warlocks and stuff right here, and your flamers and fusion guns over here? I bet you do. I bet you guys do see that. So that's exactly what we're going to do. We're just going to move all of our, Storm Guardians with special weapons and heavy weapons up here. And we're going to move our flamers up here. I know I have 5 here, but 4 works just as well. It's just the same. Absolutely the same exact thing here. Right? We're going to move them right there. And, maybe we have Eldrado over here. My boy, Eldrad. And we have the 2 flamers right over here as well. Right? So we're moving right about here, and maybe the rest of our unit is just kind of hidden behind here, and maybe we have like 1 guardian on the objective or something like that, right? All right, anyway, so what you're going to do is blast this unit to smithereens. You're going to blow them up, and you're getting a bunch of damage with all the flamer attacks and stuff like that. Eldrad has Doom, so they're done. They're dead, right? Now, what's cool about this is, yeah, if your opponent has some units back here that can shoot them, that's all fine, but they're going to have to reveal themselves, right? Like, let's assume that there's a unit of Havocs here or something, or a unit of Obliterators that come out, and they're like, all right, I'm going to be right here. Obliterators are really slow, so they move up, or Havocs, whatever it is, right? Whatever unit it is, they move up, they shoot you. They're only going to get 1 chance, and actually, they might not even get that, because you are outside of 18 inches. So they're really going to have to move up into a vulnerable position here to be able to shoot your unit. And then you can always just fade back, right? If there's a unit that is over here that draws line of sight to them, you could just say, okay, I'm just going to fade back, or I'm just going to Psychic Shield. Because basically you have to be within range. Like, your opponent has to literally place their unit on this middle objective to be able to shoot you. And as soon as you fade back out of line of sight, they're not going to be able to really do it anymore, right? You could easily fade this unit out of line of sight, and yeah, maybe you give up control over the objective, but that's okay, right? You're saving your unit, and you're putting a lot of your enemy's units out in the open, and you're baiting them into a bad position. Sometimes it's okay on turn 1, when you're not even scoring objective points anyway, to give up an early objective to make sure that your opponents are in positions where they would rather not be. And yeah, and that's basically what the Storm Guardian squad can do. The Storm Star can really play aggressively, force your opponent to react. Your opponent can't really react that well because you have things like Psychic Shield, you have Fade Back, you have these kind of different things to increase your survivability. Right? Like, if they had a fast-moving unit like Warp Talons, where's my Warp Talons? Here they are, right? If they had a fast-moving unit like Warp Talons right here, they move forward 12 inches, super aggressive. Chaos for chaos. And then you're like, okay, I'm just going to Overwatch you, my friend, and use Isha's Fury, and 4 of them die, and then they charge you anyway, and you're like, all right, go ahead and attack, and they kill like 3 Storm Guardians, or maybe not even that, because you have an invul save, right? They kill like a couple Storm Guardians, you kill this back. Well, they've just wasted their unit on you, right? Like there's nothing they can really do. Like you've psychic shield, you've used all these, command points to make your squad survive. So here's the thing also, right? And this is a big point, and I think a lot of you guys, when you play Seer Council, you have to understand this concept. You will have to dump command points into this unit. This is a command point sponge. It is going to take a bunch of command points to be able to do what you want to do with it. But if you're able to do it, which is why you take units like Eldrad and why the detachment bonus is so important, if you're able to do it, you're able to put your opponent into a really bad position. And I actually think this type of list, this Seer Council list, is going to be one of the more competitive choices for Warhammer 40k. People are sleeping on it, guys. I think it is one of the best choices. A automatic redeploy anywhere you want outside of 9 inches is already really strong, but when you combine that with defensive stratagems like 18-inch lone op and, offensive stratagems that allow you to get critical -1 AP and ignores cover on units, you start to see that there's a lot of power in this detachment. So what I'll end off by saying is that Seer Council is very good at being able to dictate where your opponents go and what your opponents are actually able to do. Guardian Battle Host, on the other hand, is going to be different. Now, you're going to have the same kind of units. You may have a Guardian Deathstar in your army, which is still great, but it's going to play different. You're going to be playing more on primaries. You're going to be more focused on killing enemy units on objectives, which is something your opponent can kind of dictate a little bit, right? So I think, honestly, yeah, there's going to be a lot of turns in the game where your opponent has to put something on the objective or they're going to just die. But if your opponent's a really aggressive player, unfortunately, Guardian Warhost doesn't have as many tools of survival and mobility as Seer Council. So there's a couple differences, right? And also, you're using mostly Guardians, so you're going to be running a ton of Guardians. It's not just going to be one unit of Guardians. So there's going to be some key differences. You're not going to be able to spam stratagems as easily in Guardian Battle Host because you're not going to get a bunch of free stratagems for your army rule, right? So there are some differences there. But essentially, yeah, these units are really powerful. They dictate where your opponent goes on the battlefield. They're just an absolute blast to play with. I've played with both of these units now, and I just think they're both so good. Like, for example, Eldrad with Storm Guardians, I know that may seem not that, maybe you want, I'd rather have Guardian Defenders or whatever. But honestly, to be real here, Eldrad giving +1 to wound can even kill vehicles, right? You have 2 fusion guns in there. All of a sudden, they're a +1 to wound. You have up to 5 destructors, strength 7, +1 to wound. You're going to be wounding stuff on 4+ with them. Possibly ignoring cover with critical, AP on the wound roll. So yeah, this brick is really strong. It's a really strong unit, and they give sticky objectives, so being able to just teleport a sticky objective unit all over the battlefield is really cool. Okay, so that's all I got for this kind of example. Let me know what you guys think about these units. Again, they're not easy to use. You have to use your opponent, like what your opponent is doing is really important. You have to pay attention to what your opponent's doing. You have to measure, you have to pay attention to threat ranges and stuff like that. You want to be asking your opponent how far units can move and still shoot and assault and stuff like that as well. Going to want to pay attention to that stuff, but if you master that, this unit can be extremely difficult for your opponent to kill and also just engage in general. And, my particular opponent, I've played him many times. When I played him with this list, he said, "Oh man, I already missed the index." And yeah, that's right, guys, because the index, it may have been tougher, but it was easier to engage, right? Wraithguard, they're in the middle of the battlefield. You can shoot them, you can outrange them, and you can play around them. It's harder to play around this kind of stuff if you're spot on with your movement. All right, guys, that's going to be it for the example. Let's go back to the video and we will finish things up. Okay, so in conclusion, the Guardian Deathstar is a really strong objective and board control piece that can offer a lot of options for Eldari players. It is, however, difficult to use and does require good strat and unit synergies to maximize its effectiveness. It's not a unit that you can just throw in your list. You really have to have a design to use it, right? When I was building my 1,000-point list, I took it in Seer Council and I had a plan for the unit each and every turn it was on the table. Now, as for the support weapon choice in the Guardian Deathstar, Guardian Defender's Deathstar, I should say, I prefer the Shadow Weaver. Some people are saying the D cannon is better. I don't know. I think the Shadow Weaver is better. And the reason why is because the Shadow Weaver is going to help you in those turns of the game where your D cannon is not going to be effective. Turns 1 and maybe even turn 2, maybe your D cannon that has to fire indirectly is not going to be that effective against enemy units, right? It's only going to be effective when you can drop behind an enemy and shoot them directly because you have Ballistic Skill 3. And even then, because you don't have rerolls, I mean, you do have the ability with a Farseer to get +1 to hit, and with Eldrad +1 to wound. Unless you have that, though, there's a chance it whiffs, right? And if it whiffs and doesn't do anything, it's 125 points for that platform. It's a little bit expensive. And personally, I would rather just hit something with the snared ability so that they have to roll dice each time they move. It gives you more board control options. And I think at the end of the day, this unit is about board control. So that's why I prefer that support weapon in particular. So, if you do plan to use the unit, you have to ask yourself some of the following questions, right? So first of all, do I need a unit in my army that can both screen my backfield and provide battlefield control? If you're picking up a very aggressive army, let's say you're playing Windrider Host or Aspect Host or War Host, you will probably not need something to screen your backfield because those armies are very aggressive. They want to be more aggressive. They want to play more MSU, Aspect Warriors all the way, deal enough damage to your opponent to where they can't fight back reliably, right? So having a control piece that stays in your backfield is just going to prevent you from using all the tools at your disposal to be able to do that. So I don't think that Aspect Host, War Host, and Windrider Host are good for this unit. The next question you want to ask yourself is, am I confident that I can protect the unit from combat or have the tools to ameliorate unfavorable situations? Do I have the tools in my army to prevent Blood Angels from being able to charge this unit on turn 1? Do I have the ability to ameliorate bad situations with shooting, right? Do I have the stratagem support? Do I have the enhancements needed? Do I have the units in my army that can mitigate that kind of attack that this unit is weak against? If you do have those things, then this unit's fantastic. If you don't, if this unit is unsupported, if this unit gets charged by something, I mean, this unit can honestly, guys, be killed by a 5-man Death Company unit with a character. It can be slaughtered fairly easily in combat, even with a -1 to hit and -1 to wound. So you do need to make sure that if that Death Company unit's coming in, you're able to overwatch it, you're positioned correctly so that you can overwatch it first, maybe throw Isha's Fury onto the unit again, and when they come in at you with the Sergeant left, that's fine, right? The Sergeant will kill 2 models, maybe 3 models in your unit, but the unit will be largely intact. You're only losing a couple of shuriken catapults at the end of the day, right? And you've, in return, destroyed the entire enemy unit. You need to put your unit into positions that this is able to happen, right? You can't just give your opponent free charges into the unit and block your own line of sight so that you can't actually shoot them with Overwatch. And lastly, is having this unit in my army going to help me achieve my army's win condition? So again, more aggressive armies, their win condition is not control the battlefield, okay? Their mission is kill the enemy army fast so that then my units that are more fragile can just kind of get a free pass on objectives, and they don't really have to worry about being able to hold them because there's nothing left that can shoot me, right? This unit is not that. This unit is very much a control piece. It is for strong objective and board control, and you have to use it very, very carefully. I actually do think that as far as Eldari go, this is probably one of the harder units to use effectively, especially for newer players that want to just jump in right away when they see, your opponent's Terminator squad on an objective. You may think, oh my god, I'm just going to jump forward and shoot it with all my flamers and stuff. And I'm going to synergize, so I shoot Warwalkers at it for -1 AP and all that. That may be fine and well, but your opponent's Terminator unit may in fact be much less points than this unit. And if you don't position them correctly, your opponent can clap back and kill the entire thing. And your opponent's just made an excellent trade. They've traded a single unit of Terminators, or even, heck, even Deathwing Knights, right? If you're able to manage to kill them all, which you maybe you will, maybe you won't, depending on what kind of support you have set up. But even if you are able to kill them, you're only killing about 230 points for the unit, and this unit is about 400 points. So again, if it's not protected afterward, if you don't set yourself up for success, that's not going to work out for you. So you do need to be careful. And again, you do need to make sure that this unit is in an army that is good at controlling the board and controlling objectives and putting your opponent on the back heel so that they can't really make a lot of good decisions, right? Your opponent, ideally with this unit, should be always thinking about it each and every turn, because if it's ever in a position where your opponent can ignore it, then it's not doing its job, right? Your opponent absolutely cannot be allowed to ignore this unit. Okay, that's going to be it for today's video. Personally, when I think of this unit, I've fallen in love, guys. So first of all, I really like Guardians and Storm Guardians. I think they're great units by themselves, but this just takes it up a notch. I love things that can layer buffs, right? It's always been something I've loved as an Eldar player, being able to guide something, doom something, and then charge in with something, just obliterate it, or shoot with something and obliterate it. And this is definitely what you can do. Now, I think this unit is really, really good in Seer Council. You can also obviously play it in Guardian Warhost or Battle Host. I think it's really good in Guardian Battle Host. I do have one issue with Guardian Battle Host, and that is just, again, like I said, its mobility is a little bit lacking, and it doesn't really do anything for Aspect Warriors except for Dire Avengers. And what it does for Dire Avengers, I don't think it's enough to justify taking. I think Azurman and Dire Avengers, though, by the way, guys, are pretty much great in every list. I think every single player is going to take Azurman and Dire Avengers in some sort of combination in pretty much every competitive Eldar list. And that obviously means one thing, guys. Azurman and Dire Avengers, probably Azurman, not so much Dire Avengers, because I think Dire Avengers by themselves are a very fair and balanced unit. But with Azurman, I think they get a little ridiculous. So I think the unit's probably going to be for the nerf. But I don't see their abilities getting nerfed. I see them, Azurman just getting raised in points. I think that's going to happen first. And then I think later on, they may actually change the rules. Who knows, right? They may change the rule to prevent his ability from allowing you to get back into a transport. That's something that could definitely happen. So do watch out for that later on. And again, I'm not trying to dissuade you guys from taking Azurman in a train. I think he's obviously awesome. But I think what's going to happen is he's going to become less of an auto-include in detachments like Seer, in basically every detachment, right? He's going to become less of an auto-include. And he's just going to be an auto-include in things like Warhost and Aspect Host, which is probably what he should be an auto-include in anyway. Okay, that's all I got for today. Thank you for watching. I hope this unit is something that you might consider running. I will say this. Not only am I impressed with the unit, but it's really fun, and Guardians look really cool on the battlefield. The new Warlock models do look cool. I was able to, before the new Codex was leaked, I was able to pick up a couple of cheap, new Warlocks on eBay that were already painted up and stuff, and, it was just a simple matter of stripping them, and I'm gonna, pretty soon I'm gonna paint them up and everything, but they are expensive. So for you guys out there who are thinking, man, I'd really like to run this, but unfortunately, those Warlocks are $50 for 2 of them. How can I possibly afford that? Go to eBay and pick up some of the old metal ones. You can usually find them for around $12. And there's even some better deals where you can find them for even cheaper, right? And you pick up 4 of those old metal ones, you put them on 32 millimeter bases, and the old metal ones look fine. I know a lot of people don't like them or whatever. They don't have as much detail as the new ones, obviously, but they still look good. They're still legal, right? As long as you have them on the right base size, they're legal for tournaments, they're legal for events and everything like that. And you can have those until you can find a good deal on Warlocks. Eventually, there's going to be a good deal for them, right? But because the new codex is out, a lot of things are more expensive right now. Now, I will give you guys a little bit of advice before I go ahead and end today's video about searching and buying things right now during this time. There are sellers on eBay and other third-party, things. They're selling the units for a higher price than even retail would suggest. Do not fall for this. There's going to be enough models out there in your local game stores, at your third-party retailers, on eBay and stuff like that after February 8th, so that you don't have to spend more money on units that, while they might have a low amount of availability at the moment, they'll be available for you guys, right? So again, don't fall into that. There's been people, I've seen it on eBay. I've seen people purchase Lycus for $60 when she's not worth $60 even on GW, right? So don't do that. Do not do that. You are feeding those people, and those people will never go away if you continue to support them. So anyway, that's going to be it for today's video. Let me know what you guys think about this unit in the comment section below. I would really like to hear your thoughts on it and what detachments they could be good in. I mean, I think Seer Council is obviously the best pick for this unit, but, you guys may have different opinions. Let me know. Thank you so much to all my patrons and supporters who have supported the channel over the last 2 and change years. I've really appreciated it. You've helped the channel grow so much, and you've helped me grow as a person, and I thank you for that immensely. If you do want to join the Patreon, I have free trials activated, which will grant you permanent access to our Discord community. We have a really cool Discord community. We can talk about lists, we can talk about units, strategies, tactics, hobbying, whatever you guys want. The community is there for you. Lastly, I do have a channel store page, and I do have an Amazon affiliate link with the old Combat Patrol in it, which does have Guardians, guys, and a Farseer. So if you want to pick that up, it's your last chance to get it for a good deal before Guardians. You have to buy them for, $50 a unit or whatever it is on Amazon or eBay, right? So pick them up for cheap while you can. Get those units, and, you'll be happy for it. Also, the channel store page, if you want to grab some Eldar inspired apparel on there, grab, your favorite Guardian rune or your Dire Avenger rune or a Craft World rune that you really want to rep. I do have the apparel for that, so check out the channel store page if you want to grab some of that merchandise. And it does help the channel a little bit as well. All right, guys, that's going to be it for today. Thanks for watching once again, and I will see you guys next time. Have a good one, everybody, and peace out.